and welcome to Landline. I'm Pip Courtney. Coming up today, Tassie farmers are diversifying to create new industry from traditional crops, and their spirits are high.
No one in Australia has any experience with potato vodka. We're the only ones doing it in Australia. We're still trial and error. At the moment, we're pretty happy with what we're doing.
Also, we visit the Kimberley and a pivot-led recovery.
Just shows the interest in irrigated agriculture. It's certainly opening up now. People are really starting to look at it and think, well, this is the way to go.
And far north Queensland cocoa growers are still dreaming of a thriving chocolate industry.
We're lucky that our farm borders right onto the World Heritage listed Daintree Rainforest, so where we're sitting now, we're lucky we've got cocoa or chocolate on one side and Daintree Rainforest on the other side, so we've got the best of both worlds.
For some, farming is a family tradition, handed down through the generations. For others, it's a lifestyle. But for all, it's a business that has to make money. For some smaller properties, that means diversifying. Fiona Breen talks to two farming families in Tasmania about change.
This is a tale of two very different Tasmanian farming families diversifying into alcohol for two very different reasons. One family farming potatoes in the southeast is aiming for zero waste. The other, beef farmers in the Derwent Valley, are trying to make the most of the property's smaller size. Both believe the past doesn't guarantee a future and change is necessary to prosper. The Dalys have been growing potatoes for 30 years.
We harvest to demand, so whatever our orders are, we then harvest. It all goes up in through a conveyor belt. We've got about 4 people on the back of it. Depending on what crop, if we need more people, we then bring it straight to the farm. Within 48 hours, it's on shelves, so it's a pretty quick turnaround.
The Dalys do this most days throughout the year, harvesting 6,000 tonnes of potatoes. But with all vegetable production comes waste, 20% of the Dalys' annual harvest, or 1,200 tonnes. The reject bin on the production line fills up quickly.
For example, that's actually a reject.
That's actually a reject, yep. That's just got a few bit of digger damage on it, a little bit of blemish there where it's sat in the ground, and but actually there's absolutely nothing wrong with that potato at all. But
so is this what the supermarket's telling you, or is this what the customer's just not buying it?
This is more what the customers are just not buying them off the shelves.
It frustrates Gerard Daly that shoppers simply aren't buying his odd-looking potatoes. Some rejects go into a new retail range of potato salads. Some go to the cows for dinner. And now 10% are going into potato vodka.
We're trying to aim for a no-waste farm. I think we'll always will have waste, but we're trying to aim for absolutely no waste on the farm. We're still about 5% that we could probably utilise. My mum is the person that is the brains behind it. She absolutely hates waste, so she's one of those people that will just do anything she can to save products.
Potato vodka was a concept that attracted Ruby Daly. She's ditched her beauty therapy career to come back to the family farm.
Alcohol has brought me back, which is a bit of a funny way to come back to the farm, but I'm really enjoying it.
It hasn't been easy. Ruby Daly and her brother-in-law, Tom Bleethman, had to hit the books and the internet. They trawled YouTube to learn the craft of vodka making. Then there was a lot of trial and error.
No one in Australia has any experience with potato vodka. We're the only ones doing it in Australia. So we really had to research. We've done a lot of self-taught. We've just really had to just figure out what we can do to make it work. And we're still trial and error, but whatever. At the moment, we're pretty happy with what we're doing.
After all the research and taste testing, they're keen to keep some of their newly learned skills to themselves. Landline's allowed in as the reject potatoes are being mashed. From there, they're tipped into a big vat of boiling water where they'll spend a week fermenting.
So after the fermentation's complete, we pump our ferment wash into the still. From there, the magic happens. We heat it up, it turns into a vapour, climbs up the column, through our pipe into our condenser, and then it spits out our liquid down here. And it'll take about 14 hours for that to happen.
The family is producing 400 bottles of potato vodka a month. It's also producing gin and liqueurs. The move into spirits has prompted a lot of interest from other farmers.
We just went to a conference before, and a lot of farmers were coming to us and saying, you know, we know how much waste we have. What can you suggest for us to do with it? You know, people really want to save their waste. It is really disappointing how much you throw out, and, you know, farmers go through so much as it is, and to throw out what they do, it's just not good enough. So we need to try and all stick together and make it sustainable.
From potato farming and vodka to a barley crop and whiskey. Tasmania is gaining a reputation for its distilling, with a couple of local drops winning international accolades. A farmer in the Derwent Valley, about an hour northwest of Hobart, is hoping to break into this niche market.
We just wanted to run cattle and fatten cattle, buy them in as store cattle and fatten them. But the property isn't really big enough to employ staff, to afford staff. So right from a very early stage, we looked to diversify. And in the last, I guess 4 years ago, the idea of whiskey distilling became a possibility, and we pursued that, and that's where we are today.
Loreni is a historic property dating back to the 1800s. It sits regally beside the upper reaches of the Derwent River. Today, the colonial mansion sits on just 80 hectares of land.
These farms, after the Second World War, Loreni was a very big property. It was sold to the government to split up as soldier settlement blocks. Along the river, the Derwent River behind me, the blocks were all about 200 acres. We bought Loreni, the original homestead block, and we bought the one next door, Parkfield.
It's still not enough to make a solid profit off one venture. That's why Ross Mace is adding whiskey to his farm portfolio. It starts here in the paddock with his second ever 26 hectare crop of barley. The harvest brings the farmer's dream of closed loop production closer to reality. Every ingredient comes from the farm. Every step of the process is done on the farm.
We're saying that we're in control of all our produce. We grow the barley, then we malt the barley, we grist it, we ferment it, we distill it, and we mature it here and bottle it all on the estate.
Straight from the harvesting machine, this fresh barley is stored in a brand new silo, but it's not there for long. It's germinated in a tank and dried in a process known as malting. Then it's ready for the still.
Stills are already preheated, and we'll start to brew. So we'll fill up the mash tun with hot water, and then we'll start gristing in our malted barley. And then that process will go on for about 30 minutes, and then we'll sort of begin to draw off after that for around 4 to 5 hours.
Loreni's head distiller, Joe Dinsmore, and his apprentice Paris Nightingale, the third generation of this farming family, are in early to start a new batch of whiskey.
So this part is all about getting the sugar out of the malted barley.
This distiller is hoping the malted barley grown in the nearby paddocks will give the property's whiskey its own special flavours.
Growing our own barley on site and malting it on site really sort of gives us an edge. And it really does define sort of Loreni's terroir as a whiskey producer. And you know, in the future, we'll probably look at cultivating our own yeast strains, probably taking off wild yeasts that are found in the orchard. So with all of that, we're really sort of almost self-sufficient in ourselves to create world-class whiskey.
This mix in the vat of hot water is expected to bring out the so-called regional flavours. It's softened into a barley mash.
So right now what we're doing is just finishing in the mashing in. So this will be pretty much what we're going to sort of draw off later, and that will later be fermented.
While all this is going on, farmer Ross Mace is busy with the cattle, but as soon as he can, he's in the distillery.
You there, Joe?
Yeah, Ross.
Yeah. How are you, man?
Well, mate, how
Good.
are you?
Good.
There's a lot riding on this new venture, and he's anxious to check all is going well.
When we're finished, we're building a new bond store now. We'll have invested close to $3 million.
Wow.
Frightening. Frightening. I should have been 40 years younger.
It's a lot of money to spend on a startup when the product takes up to 7 years to mature. The first whiskey from these barrels won't be due for another few years. In the meantime, they're generating some extra income from their own line of gins and vodkas. These farming families are not only investing their money, they're investing their heart and soul into these new distilling ventures. And of course, with every new business, there's no guarantee of success. One of the hurdles they have to overcome is the federal government's hefty excise tax on spirits, up to 40% of the retail price of a bottle. This one, it's $40 that goes to the government even before it leaves the distillery. The higher the volume of alcohol in the bottle, the higher the tax.
We're one of the highest excise countries in the world, and it really is a killer for a start-up distillery. That excise has to be paid before we can take the bottle out of the factory to sell at retail or wholesale. It's quite a slug for a start-up business.
Founder of the modern Tasmanian distilling industry, Bill Lark, says the industry is lobbying government to reduce it. A small rebate has been secured and there's a promise of another, but the tax is still high. It's been 26 years since Bill Lark successfully lobbied the federal government to overturn restrictions on small distilleries operating in Tasmania. He was the first for 150 years, and he started in the kitchen.
To think back that, a crazy idea could establish an industry, and we were there at the beginning, and I'm quite proud of the way the industry's grown up around that idea.
Now there are 36 distilleries across the state.
I suspect there'll be something like 40 by the end of the year. But the great thing about that is, to a large extent, we've all remained great friends. We support each other, we help each other, we promote each other. And a lot of people around the world and around Australia look at the way we've been able to do that and see an industry grow and celebrate with us what we've achieved.
There's less than a handful of farmers diversifying into spirits. Certainly for Ross Mace and his wife Mary, the first Loreni whiskey can't come soon enough.
Cheers, Mother.
Cheers.
For now, they have to settle with their gin.
Hi, I'm Brett Worthington. It was music to the ears of many as rain fell across some drought-ravaged areas. New South Wales in particular received the bulk of falls. Dams filled on properties that received a decent downpour.
It just takes that much pressure off instantly when you see the water running in.
Further east in Dubbo, it brought smiles to the faces of many.
Pretty exciting, isn't it? Best rain we've had for a long, long time.
But much more is needed if the drought is to end.
It's not drought breaking at the moment. It's important for spirits out there, you know, the spirits of our troops. It's good to see that it can actually rain.
All of New South Wales remains in drought. The horticulture industry has come under fire amid new allegations of farm worker abuse. The latest claims come from holidaymakers working in regional areas to gain an extra year on their visa. They've told the ABC that they've faced sexual harassment, exploitation and slavery-like conditions.
He knocked at the door and I said, I'm having a shower right now, so don't come. And he came. He didn't look at me, so I was okay, but no, don't do that.
The workers have documented their claims to highlight the conditions.
The wages is low, so I think it's like kind of slavery. Around $50 to $60 per day. But when I arrived in Wuguga in July, we just earned $20 to $30 per day.
We have lots of examples of where backpackers and the growers have a really great relationship, but unfortunately there are some growers who spoil it for everyone.
Farm lobby groups insist efforts are underway to stop further worker abuse. It comes as the federal government considers new visas to deal with farm worker shortages. The honey industry's woes have deepened with the revelation that almost 1 in 5 Australian products are fake. A groundbreaking study from Macquarie University also found that half of samples from Asia had been mixed with non-honey substances. The adulterated Australian honey had come from Queensland, Victoria, New South Wales and Tasmania.
It did include some boutique brands and it came from a range of providers. And we also tested some Manuka honey and that failed. That is a boutique brand.
Australian authorities test 5% of imported honey, but local honey isn't tested at all.
We can't know what everyone's doing, so we do our best efforts to ensure that everyone is doing things to a standard and they are doing things to a code.
The Federal Agriculture Minister, David Littleproud, has sent his department a please explain and wants to know if more testing is needed. It's been almost 2 years since white spot disease brought southeast Queensland's multi-million-dollar prawn industry to its knees. Farms were left dormant after prawns were euthanized to stop the spread of the disease. But now 2 of the affected farms have started to restock their ponds.
We've all got our breaths held. It's really, really important, and all of the farms are getting behind our farms down here at Logan.
Authorities believe the disease entered Australian waterways from uncooked imported prawns.
No absolute guarantees, but certainly with the enhanced biosecurity regime, we believe we've given ourselves the best possible chance for success.
It's estimated white spot has cost the industry $100 million. And finally, a line from an old joke became a reality in France this week, with a horse literally walking into a bar. It had escaped racing stables north of Paris. The bar owner said no one was hurt, but it remains unclear if he asked why the long face when the unexpected guest arrived. It begs the question, what's a horse got to do to get a drink around here? And that's Rural News.
The owners of a cattle station in Western Australia's far north say access to underground water is the key to making the property profitable and creating much-needed jobs. The Mowanjum Aboriginal Corporation says despite the success of its award-winning irrigation trial, it's struggled to get approval to expand. And in another disappointment, federal funding for a program encouraging disengaged school students to stay at school by working on the station once a week will run out at the end of the year. The Mowanjum Aboriginal community near Derby, 200 kilometres northeast of Broome, is home to nearly 300 people. The community's cattle station is just 55,000 hectares, which is small in this part of the world, and it's regarded as pretty ordinary grazing country. 6 years ago, Mowanjum was in danger of losing its lease, as the station was underperforming and had been for 40 years. To keep the land, they had to do something with it, so they borrowed money to buy cattle.
At Mowanjum Station, they're saddling up for a new era in the Kimberley pastoral industry. After decades of neglect, Mowanjum's new Aboriginal owners are steadily rebuilding their 50,000 hectare property.
Well, at the moment we've got the numbers up to around 1,400 head of cattle. We started off 2 years ago with nothing, so yeah, we've still got a long way to go. We've only half developed the property, and hopefully in the next 2 years we can finish off developing the rest of it and then obviously increase our numbers.
Station manager Jason Ross and his team sold the first mob of cattle off Mowanjum in more than 30 years.
Fast forward 2 years and a pioneering multi-million-dollar irrigation project funded by the state government gave Mowanjum the chance to transform its pretty ordinary country into an oasis of green. A centre pivot irrigation system tapping into underground water means 38 hectares now produces pasture year-round. Waking up to green grass every day is something station manager Mick Courtney has never experienced in all his years working in the north.
To be able to look at a good cover of roads, grass, and what has traditionally been pretty undesirable country, or unimproved. It's very undesirable country. It's it's a pretty good thing to look at each day.
The pivot completely changed the station's focus. The herd was sold, the debt was cleared, and they switched to agisting cattle owned by Pardue Beef Corporation, based in the Pilbara, 600 kilometres south. Monthly agistment checks provide what Mowanjum's never had, regular cash flow. Pardue sees Mowanjum as its calf factory. And the more intensive operation has created jobs, as it looks after Pardue's cattle and operates and maintains the irrigation equipment. But the change has been challenging. That first year, how many mistakes did you make?
Ooh, do I have to say how many? But, oh yeah, we made a few. Yeah, if had me time again, you'd do things differently with the design. I don't think I'd change the crop though. The crop is a very forgiving crop. We used double the water in the first year and the fertiliser to what we use now, so we were actually throwing money away. But all this comes out of doing the trial. You actually get to refine everything and look at costs and that. So yeah, we've learned a hell of a lot. Now we can do a lot more economically, and yeah, our watering costs are halved since the first year.
You look at what happened here with these.
Under its new Chinese owner, Pardue too has changed its grazing system, investing more than $20 million in centre pivots and switching its herd to higher value Wagyu and Wagyu cross.
With us in the mix, it's allowed the Mowanjum Aboriginal Corporation to push out onto the rest of the station, develop it, and then we actually run more cattle. They make more money, you know. So it's a bit of a win-win situation, we think.
The pivot pilot at Mowanjum is the centrepiece of the state government's $300 million Water for Food project, designed to encourage more investment in irrigation. It was recognised for excellence in the Premier's Awards 2 years ago. Next for the community was to install 2 more pivots.
If you're stuck on one, you're not going to make any money. You need to advance it to, I think it's probably 2's break even, 3's you really start to put some money in the bank.
Steve Austin says the community was shocked at the cost of the application process and the bureaucratic obstacles it faced getting approval to expand.
That would be the biggest drawback, is the government red tape. It just never ends. Just when you think you've got it all sweet, they come up with something else. People are allowed to put a thing against you to stop you going ahead without any substance behind their claim. Yeah, it's not a good situation. If you look at the country here, it's, you know, it's very hard to make any money out of it. You know, it doesn't produce well. It's a breeding country, but it's definitely not fattening. So, yeah, we need these pivots to actually make money out of the place.
Western Australia's Agriculture Minister, Alana McTiernan, defends the timeliness of the approval process, saying WA doesn't want to repeat the mistakes made in Eastern Australia, where over-allocation of water has caused environmental problems and led to states and communities fighting over water.
We're being careful in the way we go forward, but it is obvious from the number of approvals that have been given that we've not got our foot on the hose, but we are making sure that when we make a decision, it's underpinned by good science.
I visited Mowanjum late last year when it opened its gates to the northern cattle community. Interest was high because using the state's large, underutilised water resources has long been talked about as a way of drought-proofing station country and encouraging new industries.
You know, I wasn't ready for this many people, and yeah, it just shows the interest in irrigated agriculture. It's certainly opening up now. People are really starting to look at it and thinking, well, this is the way to go.
Forage options that might...
At each tent, a range of results from the 2-year trial were revealed.
A little bit interested in the...
Our sums would say that if well managed, yes, it's viable. Essentially, it's about cost of producing feed, cost of producing a kilogram of beef. And look, whether it's $1, $2, $2.50 to produce a kilo of beef, it's in that ballpark area. On that day, a lot of very, very good information came out that people can take home and build on.
Visitors heard pivots mean throwing out the traditional station management manual. Water and fertiliser application on the 4 paddocks or cells has to be precise, as mistakes are expensive. Grass cover is monitored daily for if the decision to move cattle onto fresh pasture is even 2 days late, it can take up to a month to recover.
We really need to change our mindset, Pip, is we've got to treat ourselves as dairy farmers. You know, you've really got to model yourself on a dairy farmer, as strange as that may sound. And look, we've certainly had plenty of critics on the way. As the nature of these projects seem to, you know, you seem to inherit a lot of criticism along the way, but I mean, that's what today's all about, to get people on board here and have a look around at a ground level view and ground truth some of this stuff.
Mick Monday manages the 500,000 hectare Aboriginal-owned Nookanbar station.
They want to get involved with this stuff, just for, you know, development, and, you know, we're not only talking cattle, we're talking Indigenous people start growing their own veggies and all that stuff, you know, from it just help with the employment and stuff.
Are you inspired by what you've seen today?
Yes, I am, yeah. So that gave me chucked me in a bloody overdrive now to start getting everything going.
Pivot 2 was finally approved mid-year, but now there's another hurdle. Mowanjum's been accused of illegally clearing 80 hectares in preparation for Pivot 2. There's now uncertainty if and when the second pivot will go in.
They keep asking, well, you know, what's the hold-up and what are they talking about? There's nothing, you know, there's nothing out here that we could endanger. They can't understand how a white man can make such a fuss over a small thing.
The Department of Water and Environmental Regulation says it is unable to comment on an ongoing investigation. As to the delays in getting approvals, Minister McTiernan says the government has streamlined the process into a one-stop shop by combining 4 departments into one, and says it is committed to making investment more attractive by changing WA's restrictive pastoral lease system.
We're at the same time, whilst we really want to going ahead with it, we do think the 2 things we have to make sure that this is that it is environmentally sustainable in terms of the local flora and fauna, and that the water take is going to be able to be sustained. There is no doubt that a lot more could be done on those Indigenous stations, and we want to work with the communities to deliver that.
The irrigation project is a source of great pride at Mowanjum. It's hoped regular school visits will encourage local students to consider a career in the cattle industry. Each day, a different group visits to learn about livestock management, fencing, mechanics and irrigation systems.
They're looking at this to change the lives of their kids growing up, and we need to open up more job opportunities because it's very hard for the people in Mowanjum to get jobs and that. There just aren't jobs in the Kimberleys here at the moment. So, yeah, they're really keen. And the bigger the operation becomes, the more jobs that open up.
The program is for those struggling with mainstream schooling. Students can't visit unless they're going to school.
We've had some boys who have gone into employment once they've graduated from school. Some young fellows have headed off to different stations around the Kimberley. Some are still working on those stations. Some have given it a go and decided that's not for them. But just the skills that they've learned has been extremely good for these young people. And the camaraderie out here that they learn, you know, they learn to work in a team out here, and that it's vital to be, you know, in that team, to be a cog that doesn't let the rest of the machine down. Thanks, Mike. It's pretty heartwarming when you see somebody come back and say, hey, thanks for that, I got a job because of you.
The students enjoy getting out of the classroom. And Kian, what do you like about coming out here?
Probably hands-on and stuff, you know, in school, bit better area, get away from the class and stuff. Yeah.
You know, some of those kids are coming out of, for want of a better word, inherent social problems in their communities and in town, and I think they strive on discipline. I think they strive even more on responsibility. So to be able to put a bit of responsibility and a bit of discipline sort of go hand in hand with these young fellas, and they really have strived.
No, you can't ride.
Funding for the school visits is through the federal government's Indigenous Advancement Strategy. The money runs out at the end of the year, which has the school and the community worried.
I suppose there was always an end date to the funding. However, we're hopeful that we can negotiate either federally or state to source some funding to continue this program, because we definitely want to support it, and we definitely see value in sustaining this program.
Mowanjum has had several highs in the last 6 years, from kickstarting the rundown station and re-engaging its youth to moving into irrigation. There have been lows as well. But Alana McTiernan is more upbeat. She says after a decade of mapping of potential irrigation sites, researchers have concluded the state's water resources are currently underutilised.
We've got a number of licences that are, a number of applications that are in the mix, and we're trying to get this work finalised, probably maybe another year away from really getting that, getting a solid take on exactly what the water capability is going to be.
That's the hard part to understand. They're all saying, like, they all want us to create employment opportunities for the people and stuff like that, but it's the government that putting the handbrakes on it all. Like, you just can't see any logic behind it.
Mowanjum now faces a waiting game to see if Pivot 2 can proceed and if the school program will continue. And as for Pivot 3, which would secure the operation's viability, well, it's gone from being doable to improbable. Coming up, cocoa growers in far north Queensland hope their chocolate frogs capture the market.
We've taken the fibre, we've put it back into this frog, and we now talk about a whole sugarcane sweetener.
"20 years ago, chocolate powerhouse Cadbury decided to try growing cocoa in Australia. Eventually, the company pulled the pin on commercial operations, but cocoa growers haven't given up on their dream. In fact, they're diversifying by using different parts of the cocoa plant to make all sorts of related products. Courtney Wilson has the story.
There's something special about being in the business of growing cocoa to make chocolate. Even more so when this is your commute to work. And this is your office.
So this is it, hey?
This is it. 3,000 cocoa trees. We're lucky that our farm borders right onto the World Heritage List to Daintree Rainforest, so where we're sitting now, we're lucky we've got cocoa or chocolate on one side and Daintree Rainforest on the other side, so we've got the best of both worlds.
Mossman in far north Queensland is home to the first chocolatiers to grow and sell cocoa beans commercially in Australia. But it was a long and winding road to get there, and since that time it's remained tricky. Some of the pioneer farmers have walked away, and while new players have joined, the growth of both the cocoa plantations and the industry has been slow.
Hasn't probably jumped as quick as we would have hoped. Cocoa's, the labour intensity is what spooks a few people, but there is a few people that are committed.
It's still in its infancy. I'm not going to say that it's, flowing out everywhere. We've had to be patient. It takes 3 years for a tree to start yielding pods.
This is where far north Queensland's chocolate journey began. It was here that Cadbury Schweppes first planted trial cocoa back in the late 90s. Barry Kitchen was heavily involved in that work in his then role as Research Director for Cadbury.
Cocoa plantations all around the world look different, but this is a pretty unique one from Australia's point of view and the world. And we have had visitors here from, countries that really say, this is incredible. And we've got really beautiful trees. We don't have, touch wood, a lot of the diseases that are found in other countries. And I can remember being here when it was planted. It's like my baby.
The farm, Goodman Estates, is owned by John Goodman. Since the Cadbury cocoa went in, his plantation has almost trebled in size, and it's still growing.
Because I had a leg into the industry, I thought I had a hectare there, I might as well plant a bit more myself, and I went and planted a hectare, or a little bit over a hectare, in 2 different stages. And what we have here behind me is the 4th stage.
But despite heavy investment in the research trials, Cadbury's pulled the pin on its part in developing an Australian cocoa industry. The reasoning? Because for a big corporation, the economics of it simply didn't stack up. So Barry Kitchen set up Daintree Estates, a co-op with growers and producers to make single origin Aussie chocolate and pick up where Cadbury's left off. Almost 20 years since that original planting, the industry is still small. there's less than 30 hectares of land across Australia planted to cocoa. But growers believe there are big opportunities when it comes to using the whole plant and value adding.
I've got to stand up here and look at where it's attached and like that.
So how do you know if it's ready?
Well, it's ready because of the colour for a start and its size. But the other little trick that you use is you just give it a bit of a rattle.
Yep.
And when it's really, really just right, you will feel the seed inside just move slightly.
And how heavy is it? Can I have a little feel?
They're usually about 400 grams, 500 grams. You can get bigger ones than that, but that's...
Oh, cool, wow.
And there we go. That's the seeds, and you can see...
The part of the pod that actually goes on to become chocolate is relatively small.
By the time you dry this, you get 9 or 10% of the weight of that pod is what ends up as cocoa beans to make chocolate.
So the bulk of it is left behind?
The bulk of it is normally waste.
Right.
One way or the other.
But where there's waste, there's opportunity to try and turn it into something marketable. So a lot of science has gone into finding new and unique ways to use every part of the cocoa pod, starting with the discarded husks.
We know it's got some really good things in it. It's got protein, it's got fibre, it's got antioxidants, it's got polyphenols. And we dry it and we turn it into a powder.
That's what Barry Kitchen believes is the key to keeping the Far North's chocolate dreams going and growing. Under his stewardship, Daintree Estates has dabbled in producing chocolate lip balm, chocolate soap, even a tea made from cocoa tree leaves.
Everywhere along the way, we're looking for an opportunity to turn something that might normally get wasted into value.
Cane and cocoa grower Gerard Ruby shares that passion for value adding. Not long after cocoa went in on his family's 4th generation cane farm back in 2006, the doors were also thrown open to tourists.
One of the questions I asked on the tour is where does anyone know where cocoa first come from? I mean, I have a fair few school groups come through, and a lot of the kids all stick up their hand and say the supermarkets. They can tell you what aisle it comes from, but they can't tell you where it comes from or how it's grown. So it's good to explain that side of things too, how that works.
He says visitors are often surprised to learn cocoa originated in the Amazon, and it has to be hand-picked, one of the reasons chocolate production is so costly. So why do they have to be hand-picked?
If we damage the growing point, then we won't get another one from that tree. With cocoa, wherever there's timber is where you get fruit. So if we go through and twist it or pull that pot off that tree, you damage that growing point and you won't get another one from that area. So that's one of the labour intensity of it. You've got to go through and cut each one off with a pair of snips. Snip, take it away, and away you go.
From the Puglieses and the other Daintree Estate contracted farms around Mossman, the cocoa pods go to this local facility. They process around 4 tonnes of pods here every fortnight throughout the season, which generally lasts from around May through to January. And just like picking, the whole process is very hands-on.
We inherited production techniques from developing countries, and that is essentially natural fermentation for an instance, you know, so it's within wooden boxes. We try now to emulate the wine and the cheese industry where to a certain extent they can control the process, they can control the fermentation in a controlled environment. One of the major issues we have being in a tropical environment is humidity and the issues with drying. So I've got this dryer which is going to help us to control a little bit the environment we're putting the beans in.
So how long have the beans been in there and how long do they generally kind of stay in?
So the beans have been here for 2 days and they will stay in here for about 7. This is something you cannot rush. Now, roasting is finished.
Once they're fermented and dried, beans are then roasted.
What we're going to do is make sure they cool quickly. After roasting and winnowing, I'm pouring the cocoa nibs into the grinder, and eventually, after a few days, we'll get a nice smooth paste. So it's called a cocoa liquor. And then from this, depending on the recipe, whether it's a milk chocolate or a dark or flavored, we add the sugar or
this is the start of where the magic happens.
This is it.
One of the big points of difference between how chocolate is made here versus elsewhere is the kind of sugar that's added to the cocoa liquor.
We only use raw sugar. You know, we don't like using white sugar if we could avoid it, and happily we're able to source and we still get raw sugar.
Then there's the special recipe they've used to make Australia's answer to the Freddo frog, a milk chocolate frog nicknamed Phyto that's made using a special patented sugarcane extract.
We've taken the fibre, we've put it back into this frog, and we now talk about a whole sugarcane sweetener. It's sugar, but it's got all the components that's in that sugarcane plant.
But despite all of the positive steps forward, at nearly $10 for a block, the cost of this chocolate can be a sticking point.
There's no way, from all the costs we have with labour and the efforts we go to make special chocolates, we have to, you know, it is a premium product. And we never wanted it to be a supermarket product, and we want people who want knowledge about where they're getting their food from.
John Goodman has learnt to embrace the hard work that comes alongside growing cocoa. His farm is home to the only commercially operational cocoa plantation in Australia to become organically certified. Rather than using herbicides or pesticides to control bugs, his cocoa trees are crawling with green ants that do the job for him.
But the cocoa seems to exist by itself without spraying it if you let the green ants in there, and it takes time for that to happen, and eventually the yields are getting better and better.
John's recently planted almost 700 new trees. They'll take around 3 years to produce fruit, but still, it's a positive sign for the growth of the industry in the far north.
Sky's the limit, really. I've got plenty of land, and there's good water underground if you really want to get serious about it.
Daintree Estates has outsourced the actual chocolate making to Belgian Delights, a factory based on Queensland's Gold Coast. They've also recently landed an opportunity to have their chocolate stocked in Australian retailer David Jones's gourmet food hall. But to get even better, they know they need to get bigger.
There has to be more plantations planted. We've got to get critical mass, and we've got to hopefully work together a lot more than what we're doing at the moment.
So if we had every cane farmer put in 1 hectare of cocoa, you'd have a good cocoa industry and a good sugar industry, and they do complement each other well.
We have good trees, good husbandry, fantastic farmers, producing, a great cocoa, and there's no reason why we couldn't produce, chocolate as good quality as the best.